Welcome to the Grizzled Geologist Podcast. I have a new guest today named Taylor Bartholomew, and we just kind of met recently. She's looking for work, and she was put in touch with me through a mutual friend who's a geosteerer in the business, and she wanted to come on the show and talk about some of the stuff that she and I share mutual interests in, like field planning, geosteering, and also finding a job. So Taylor, why don't you take just a second and introduce yourself, and we'll get going.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kate. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I love how the cards kind of just like fell in place with a mutual friend, and he's like, you should give Keith a call. And, here we are a couple weeks later talking about work. But I'm Taylor Bartholomew. Started out my career in offshore oil and gas production, exploration, and then made a move to Murphy from BHP because I just really enjoyed more the faster pace. I mean, as fast pace as offshore can go at 15 feet an hour sometimes. But
really,
getting more of the planning stuff. Oh yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit. I've never gone offshore. That's something to add here. You're saying, are these like horizontal wells or is it all directional work?
It was all directional work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So vertical perfs along, you go and you get directional out to the reservoir, and they're thick reservoirs, correct?
Yes.
And so you're talking about kind of almost lateral length equivalency in vertical perforation.
It's quite a bit.
Okay.
And especially, depending on where you're at in proximity to the traps and then, the salt domes and whatnot. I was primarily in Mississippi Canyon.
Okay.
And had done some modeling and a bunch of seismic interpretation for, basin models. But when I moved to production and development, and things, I guess the pace of work picked up and, you're crunching numbers and kind of analyzing more the reservoir parameters.
Okay.
And then seeing some of the drilling, that's what kind of sparked my interest in more the operations and planning side. And so when I was at Murphy, I had about 10 wells at one time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's doable in the sense that, you're planning a well for a year and a half maybe. So the lead time.
So 10 wells per year, you were running 10 rigs at once.
Pardon?
Was it 10 wells per year you were saying you were planning, or you were running 10 rigs at once with
planning?
Murphy?
So they were all in different phases. Like some were drilling, really you have one or two. But then the others are anywhere along this process of, we have gone to bid, we got the block, and then, you're working with regulatory and to finalize all of that. And then you have to go to subsurface hazards, which, people talk about like watching paint dry about things, especially like, if you're onshore and you're having to slide so much and it's just, grueling and it's 25
Is that
to
why
40
it's so slow on the offshore? Is it all sliding the whole time? Or are there other like
it's mostly
technical
that. It's
things?
just the depth. So you can get up to like, you get 5,000 feet of water, give or take, and then you're down there like 15,000 feet.
Okay, so these are like 20,000 plus foot wells. And so you're getting down there and you're, plus you've got directional tools in the hole. You got to keep it straight. Okay.
Yeah,
that's
and so
interesting.
when I was doing offshore stuff, it was mostly on that geo and planning side. So when it came to like tool knowledge, assemblies, odors, the very technical drilling bit, I wasn't as involved, especially because, when you have 10 wells that you're planning, all in different phases. Like there was one I remember I could sit there and model, the potential drilling plans or directionals, because you have to mine certain things when it comes to seafloor hazards and then shallow gas hazards. So pulling those in and getting all the surfaces to kind of show where this directional plan is better than this one, and let's optimize these. Here's our plan B. While I'm doing that with drilling and subsurface, I can equally have another screen up and you can see an like a seafloor ROV going around the seafloor to find any hazards, like shipwrecks, archaeological
so cool
stuff.
And high tech. Yeah, so that's super interesting. Super interesting. So you're saying that this is where your kind of love of field development and planning kind of started, was with the offshore stuff. Okay, well then, all right. Well, so how have you integrated that into what you're doing now?
Well, operations and just all the entities that come with it when you're having to update, certain key players, get information from other disciplines and stakeholders. Mm-hmm. And then offshore, especially when the companies were larger for the most part, that, engineering is over here on this floor, geology is over here on this on this floor.
So they're pretty siloed from each other.
Yeah. And then they had, and again, it's been many moons since I've been offshore. So, or working offshore. So the structure of companies might have changed. I'm not sure in that, like more of integrated kind of asset teams.
Sure. That kind of stuff can change.
Yeah.
Like
But
interactions where people are
in my
placed.
environment, it was pretty siloed. So I was running back and forth, just trying to learn more from the engineering side to kind of filter it down to telegeology, then taking all the geology, we'll just call it the super nerd geology stuff, and then filter that down to relay it to engineers. And then the same thing with my crew that was offshore. I had diversified still back then.
Okay.
And, the mud loggers, the crew out there, communicating back and forth. And that oddly integrated into what I've done since then. When market crashed back in, was it 15, 16? I wound up getting into teaching. And so just being able to manage so many different, I don't know what you call it, things, just all the things. I mean, kids are kids. You don't know what they're going to say or do or act or go back and forth. And then you're having to teach. And then you have someone throwing a stapler across the room, and like, there's never a dull moment. And so it's just being able to kind of think ahead and integrate multiple different things into a project, which is, at that point your classroom. But I left that in about almost 2 years ago, and started onshore work, which was neat because there was the learning curve of, went with offshore. This is what it looks like offshore, having to have the lens. Okay, well, if this is the process offshore, what is it like onshore? And while there's an overlap, if you were to put like a Venn diagram up of similarities, I'd have to say that the loop in the middle would probably have the least amount of stuff in it. But it's been great. Like just the learning and then also the ops. And so being able to do that. And then after classroom management with all of the things.
I'd rather manage geosteering group, that's
definitely there were days when you just like look at it and you're like, why am I doing this? And
well, you have to,
I don't know what it says about my, about my mental state, but I chose to teach middle school. So I had 5th and 6th graders.
Okay. Well, 5th and 6th isn't that bad. I mean, I would say 7th and 8th could be the worst.
I got stuck with a gardening class that was for 8th graders. And first of all, I kill cactus. Like I will look at a plant and it will die. And all of a sudden I'm like, what the hell? Wait, this was not part of the job description and it's 8th graders. But anyhow, and so just all the different entities that involves of lining things up, whether it be people or data or deliverables, tasks, different disciplines. Because if you think about it, every child is different. And it's just like you have completions, drilling, reservoir, appraisal. You have even within geology, you have different depths.
Subsets.
Of
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so and then land, but it's not just land. It's, land and deals and acquisitions and leads, but then there's subsurface land and then there's surface land. And so, looking at that and figuring out, what does everybody need? Like, what is your need? What is my need? And we're all trying to get to kind of a common goal, umbrella scale, drill a successful well. But then along the way, you have all of these micro processes with stakeholders coming in depending on the deliverable or what you're working with right now, because the people involved in getting a survey and reviewing a survey are going to be are not going to be the same people necessarily that are going to be doing a post-well review.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so continuing to work with them and it's great because being able to define those systems, the microsystems even better, especially depending on bandwidth of your team and then the pace of the asset.
Yeah.
Really excelling at that. And it's coming from like a people forward kind of vision. It's like, okay, the more you know. I forgot who I was talking to. Friend of mine owns a completions company and we were just kind of texting back and forth. And it really is the more you know. And I really enjoyed working with completions and learning about it because then I have a forward look of, okay, as I'm planning, as I'm doing my geology work, as I'm setting up my well profile and my well binder, as I call it, with all the data ready to drill, the geoprogs, the contacts, I'm already forward thinking about dates of what completions might need. Or, hey, if I move this target here, how is this going to change the completion? Or, oh, if I land here versus here, will this take out a stage or two? And so knowing more about completions in that regard, and then drilling as well, and then regulatory land, and integrating that into my work
Field
along the
wide
way.
planning.
Yeah. It's I feel like it's a, you're either you like it or you don't, because there are some people that just don't like planning and don't want to set up processes. But
Right.
when you have, onshore, that's one of the biggest, like, number one things that's different from offshore is the pace of the work, especially if you have
Yeah,
an
I
active
would
drilling
assume it's
program.
quite a bit faster.
Yeah.
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 But then that goes back to, it is faster, but if you're focused on one asset versus, offshore, it's slower. It allows you to develop multiple wells at different points
Sure.
along the process and
Sure.
manage that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so there does become a kind of a trade-off on the time that you have to do this and what the people, the subsurface team and, people that are in charge decide how you're going to, how much you want to drill, right? And then they hand that off to a person such as yourself. And that's right, you're going to communicate with different teams because different processes are involved here. We got to find a place to actually put the rig in the facilities. They've got to
Hmm.
work with geology to make sure that we can reach these drilling locations from there. We've got to deal with a lot of things that have to be on location, done at the right time, surveys being correct, wells placed in the right spot, in the right bench, named and categorized properly. So that's like kind of so are you saying that that's like kind of the process you really like kind of doing that, or are you more into the like live action part? See, for me, planning is okay. Like, the whole field planning, I can do it. And, that's usually involved with type curve areas and reservoir
Hmm.
engineers and a bunch of things like that. But for me, the action for me is at the bit, I don't mind getting woke up at night or worrying about a fault or anything like that. I actually enjoy the live action aspect of the geosteering. So when you're talking about these things that you're proficient in and enjoy doing, are you saying that you do both? You kind of have to do the big field planning as well as, I assume you're not like in every survey loading, at this point, but kind of overseeing the operations and, the geosteering aspect of drilling.
So the overall answer to all of that is yes.
Okay.
It really is long-term field development
That's your
and working.
passion.
Yeah, well, it was
Okay.
long-term field development and live ops. So you're doing kind of both because, as you're drilling wells and collecting data, synthesizing the interdisciplinary data, you're also trying to think long-term and figure out, like, okay, do we want to test extensive a reservoir first? Do we
Yeah.
want to go where we know it is and then just step out a little bit?
Yeah.
Then you have to take things into consideration like spacing, any producers close by in relation to that. How is it going to affect your well and production? But then also, are there other reservoirs? So you
Yeah.
kind of stagger. A lot of these things, which also it's not just a geo decision at this point, it's a team decision
No,
and planning
certainly. Yeah.
and managing that. And then forward looking about what data we want to get, whether it be for reservoir or completions or geology, as you're drilling and developing your drilling program to get what you need to understand the rock
Mhm.
to make better wells. But at the same time, while that is going on, you also have wells drilling. And so that's the well readiness. And I
Yeah.
think
Well,
you
and
and
you're
I,
taking the new information from the new wells, and
yeah,
you just had a new IP over here, and people get all hyper about, wanting to, do different things, based on the latest thing, and it can get interesting in the full field development. And that actually does segue into a quick point that I did want to make. This is kind of a
yeah,
personal belief here. I do believe in the integration of the geo ops and the subsurface team, the people that are deciding where we want to put the wells and the people that are doing them. But I do believe that there's a really good reason to kind of live in separate worlds to some degree also.
yeah.
This is the applicability of the idea, and really, and this is the space I really enjoy. It's like, okay, you guys just tell me where you want to put it, and me and my boys over here are going to deal with the details of that. We're going to live with this thing and watch its every move, and we can have a couple of them going at the same time. But I do see it is a difficult part of this job, and one of the things I
Absolutely.
really liked about Revolution was that I was able to just really focus on the drilling. I had a bunch of other, other things that we had to do, typical geology stuff, A&D. I did all the geotech as well and all of that. But, really being able to dig into it is where I was able to kind of figure out, what my passion was, what I really liked
Yeah, for
about it,
sure.
and then develop the tools and packages that I would deliver that, I think made a big difference. So how do you balance the two? And at big companies, I had to do it. I remember with Aubrey, and I'm going to let you go here, but it was that I would be out pulling core until 3 o'clock in the morning and still working on a PowerPoint while I'm out at the rig, for
Yeah.
the investor presentation. And actually, I hated that. Like, I did not like that, like not being able to listen. We have to carry different roles, but for me, really being able, in particular, because I do believe that geology is the tip of the spear, being in zone is the only way for your company to survive. And so,
Absolutely.
I feel we need our geosteers focusing on geosteering. It is kind of the moral to that story.
Yeah, it is good. And that's how you balance it. And like I kind of look back, I'm like, man, especially when I got like, two wild minions running around some days in the house. But
Yeah.
I go back to like two things. One, it's more of like I am used to and thrive at more of that kind of multitasking, a lot of things going on, planning systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so my strength in that, I think, helped me be successful with this. And then how I mentioned just the buy-in from other disciplines to help with those microsystems
Sure.
along the way. Because I remember I had called kind of an ad hoc meeting with a few key players because there was a process that didn't exist, and it was a couple weeks and 35 emails, and emails were getting crossed, and it's going back to surveyors, but then surveyors, by the time they get it back, we have more feedback, and it's like this is not efficient. And so being able to define who owns it at this stage, what is the process, who reviews it, let's do it all at once, and really consolidating that to cut out all of that noise, so to say.
Yeah,
Now
and the
that's
more
off.
people though, you can't get away from it though. And again, that was what I'm a big small company kind of guy. That's one thing that's going to come out from here. I believe in nothing more than efficiency. You can do a lot with just a few people. Not that I don't want people to have jobs. I'm just saying the way I operate.
Yeah.
I'm just, I look at it from an efficiency standpoint, but that is an interesting take here. What are some of the things that you think that you kind of offer that are really strong in this space?
That's a good question. I was thinking about this. It definitely is, what I just spoke to, but then also
Big scale field planning and like kind of, yep.
One of my coworkers had found a sticker at one point and said, "Hold on, let me overthink this."
That's not bad. I'm taking t-shirt ideas right now, so that's not a bad one. Yeah, I'm definitely going merch. So
it's definitely, I will double check, recheck to the point where I like convince myself I'm wrong and then redo it all just to make sure. And then comb over it, just real gnat's ass. And I got this phrase from when I was teaching at one of my districts, just because the group of kiddos I was working with, and it's like sweat the small stuff, because I'm sure you've seen it, and I know you had Matt Leverett on a couple weeks ago, maybe it was last week. I had the pleasure of working with him.
He's the best.
And
having Ron come on. Was Ron working with y'all too?
Yeah.
He was. He's good to
but you have one valve off, or you have rubber or tubing. It's I don't know, $500. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then you have this, $20,000 a day rig that's being held up by like one tube. That it is about the small stuff. It's about the small stuff on site, but it's also about the small stuff, at least for me, on my planning. And so doing that while making geoprogs. So that's one of my suits in that, is sweating the small stuff. I will say
I'm a big believer in that, and the whole pre-steering and doing a really detailed geoprog with lots of information. Matt and I went into a great deal about that. I have a bunch of shorts on YouTube. Make sure you go check them out.
Oh, I will. I love those guys. I sit there, and your little shorts too. I'll sit there and like look at them before I go to bed. And
Thank you. That's awesome. You've been
reading.
super
I will.
supportive
It's like this.
of it.
It is. It's like, it's chill. You're not there scrolling through Instagram. You're learning things, but it goes back to the more you know, because again, that helps with planning. And so integrating different disciplines and the learnings from that, being an active learner in regards to what do I need to know from this stage in your job to help me have different think aheads for what I'm doing. And then, doing like the whole well setup. I know I've all my geoprogs while onshore were in Kingdom. So I've used that suite. Offshore, we use Petrel.
Okay.
I've heard it called like the fancy Petra.
Yeah, that's the only one. I'm pro at everything, at all of them, but that's the only one I didn't. That's the rich kid one. You know what I'm
Oh, I
saying?
love
Like
it.
we don't, no one I've ever worked for even thought about having a patrol license. So you don't
Well,
need
it's
it.
muy caro, I think. That might be why.
Yeah.
But I
But
haven't
Kingdom was your
obviously.
Kingdom is kind of your main big suite. Okay.
What, yeah, for onshore, what I have been using. And I used it offshore some, but that was before they kind of integrated all these little companies together, like with SeisWorks, and I used it mostly for seismic interpretation, or actually strictly for that.
Okay.
And then, getting that well readiness together when it comes to the prog, and again, centralizing everything. So it wasn't just a geoprog, it was a geoprog. Then you have a geoprog for active drilling, which is plan versus actual. Then the next tab, you have I put the casing design, the days versus depth.
So are you saying you would like go back into the geoprog and like update the well path and do it like that? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely. And a big learning too, in those thick sections and the reservoirs, depending on where you're at, if they're pinching out or they look different, in East Texas for South Texas versus West Texas, really breaking those up and not
Yep.
necessarily doing sequence stratigraphy, but just identifying some correlatable benches.
Sure.
So that as you get closer to your reservoir, there's no sense in changing or shifting a target or a landing zone that might be, 9,000 feet underground when you're 20 feet off at 2,000 feet. So having those like more frequent, deeper benches was super helpful to help like refine casing points and really fine tune
Yeah,
that.
nice. You felt really good, and you'd be able to
Yeah.
do your prog work and get your uphole tops ready, get the drilling engineers the right information to be able to set the casing at the right depth. When unless you know all the kind of crazy stuff that happens down there, you could have these zones that kind of slough in on you and catch
Totally.
it. Like you hit a fracture and lose circulation. There's a myriad of problems that we can have when we're down there, but that's where the accuracy in your pre-planning comes into play. So you're not
Absolutely. And then also having just the kind of put it on the mental shelf of, hey, as you keep drilling over here in this side of the field, we didn't experience this issue in this formation, but over here we did.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would include that kind of information in your geologic prognosis also.
That, and so you have a description, you have the casing plan, you have the mud logging program, you have the logging program, like all the data is in one, you have the casing points listed in there, and updating as you go. But then, like I said, that mental shelf of, it's not just about, people think subsurface mapping, oh, it's a map of a formation top. It's like, well, actually, let's kind of map the actual drilling trends through these certain formations, because while it is, say it's easier drilling versus tougher drilling, that, okay, well, that kind of helps it helps drilling at least to, plan in advance for any plan B, plan C they may need to adjust if they encounter something. But then at the same time, that could also be considered a geohazard in a way.
Sure.
Put it into that. And that was one of the other things when we were doing Eastern Anadarko and then up in North Dakota, is just digging through the data, even drilling reports like DNC as well, to compile both drilling hazards and formation hazards or formation occurrences, as you'd put it, and starting to map those and overlay them along the planned wellbore to give a look ahead for drilling. It's like, hey, somewhere between 400 and 600 feet, man, there's going to be a potential fault, just like giving you a heads up there. And really using that with the geosteering is great. I always believe in having an accountability partner.
Yeah.
And so that was helpful with managing both the planning and live ops.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we had companies can set it up differently. You have contractors in the background that are kind of doing it with you if you have to step into a meeting or,
Yeah. No, I always run consultants. I stay up during the day. I load the ones that I need to. I do a morning and an evening big report that's a big look forward. But I run consultants at night, and I run ones that I trust. And if you set the tone and give instructions and scenarios, one of the things that like Matt Leverett was talking about is that, if we're running multiple interpretations, like they need to be talked about, because like a lot of the time when that happens, and I've seen it, I've seen it. Well, we were running this and, it's like, well, okay, these guys are really smart and you don't need to do a lot of words, but if you can demonstrate, like show a picture, we're right here. It could look like this, it could look like this, and it could look like this, and they'll figure it out. And what you really want is for the drillers to be thinking and being careful along with you. And so if you give them the information, they're going to be able to make decisions like, hey, we're building a little bit right here. Maybe it shows that we have some room, but if we just kind of keep it subdued a little bit, don't let it build up right here, we'll be in a better position if it goes this way. And that, as the geologist, that is our decision, the plan and what we're doing going forward. But having your team on the same page, thinking in the same wavelengths that you are, you're going to be in much better shape, giving them all the information so they can help make the decisions with you. So when they get the email that's got the 0VS target line, target change, this or that, they're not surprised. So work on developing your relationships with these people too. It's really important to be not a confusion or an adversary to the rig. Right.
Yeah, that was one thing. And like I said, I love the action. Sorry, one of my best friends is calling. I'm like, girl, I don't need you to call me 5 times. I'm busy.
Well, and let's talk a little geosteering, but we're actually getting pretty close on time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So why don't you, what are some of your tips and tricks geosteering wise? You can finish your story that you were just about to get into also, if you'd like.
It was with geosteering, again, you touched on it in something Matt said. Or 2 things Matt said, and that's why I was like, preach louder for the people in the back, y'all, that it was communication, and it ties into the microsystems I'm talking about, but defining clear communication systems, defining clear platforms, and
knowing how to use your tools.
Yeah. And building those relationships, it kind of goes back with either you're a planner or you're not a planner. Mm-hmm. It's like you enjoy the rig side or you don't. And like I was very fortunate. I had an amazing VP of DevOps at my last company, and she was fine with my going out there when I wanted to, because that's how I learned too. So you're learning the people and you're learning the technical work as well. And so establishing those relationships along the geosteering and that frequent communication, not the chitter chatter, lovey-dovey back and forth, whatever, but it is technical. And then having the huddles on the side, so to say. I definitely agree with Matt about the multiple interpretations, because I learned it is very important for drilling to have option A, B, or C to know when to pivot.
Pictures all they need. You don't have to go into all this great detail. Like, this is what it looks like. It's one of these, Yeah. And they get that.
And definitely having, if you don't have seismic, that your dip's a little bit harder, but you can also do the look aheads. Definitely for the steering, go back and look at your analog wells, look at the drilling reports, try and map those hazards along the planned well bore and the previously drilled well bores, so that you can start to see trends and give look aheads for drilling. Yep. And then especially that, accountability partner, because in some cases, is it a repeat section? Is it doing this a fault? Or does this just actually kind of look the same depending on how you overlay your gamma? So it's the relationships and then holding on to the good eggs, the ones that you jive with, the ones that are technically astute, and keeping them with your team. So as you're building these relationships, you're also building a team and keeping that close. So those would be my tips and tricks for success for geosteering. And then especially, it's software. Like, we glitch out as humans, technology will as well. Yeah. So, plan for those glitches and always ask questions was my big one about Sam was like, hey, what does this button mean? Or I can't find this button again. Can you remind me? And just stay humble with it.
Yeah. Well, I believe as a consultant, you need to be able to use what your clients need. So what are some of your toolkit that you use? What are you into? Tell people really quick, you're looking for work. What is it you're looking for? And we'll get ready to wrap it up.
What I was doing, I was really excited about integrating mud logging data, but advanced mud logging like mass spec, XRF, XRD with the reservoir data, with the drilling and completions data, kind of along the wellbore. I know Core Geologic offers a platform like that. And I was going to work with Diversified to get that going, to really understand, because, drilling optimization. So that would have been in ZoneVu. It would have been, so ZoneVu I work with, and then engineering analytics, that's Core's kind of platform I just mentioned. Yeah. Then there's a GIS plugin from XStat Pro called unconventional analyst,
Okay.
which you put in your parameters, your build out, your step out, the build rate, the well offset, and it will place pads and wells for you, and then you can kind of adjust. So that's for like lease
pretty cool.
acquisition planning.
Yeah. And so that's an ArcGIS plugin.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
I've started using QGIS just so I haven't bought an ARC license in a long time. Just let you know, there's stuff out there
Noted.
that definitely works.
yeah, this plugin was great. And then teaching myself star steer,
Okay.
kind of the way I did with the synthetic ties in Kingdom of doing the research first, understanding it, and then starting to apply it. So that whole bit is and
Great.
Excel, it keeps me sane.
Well, I have a feeling you're going to be working before I am full time.
We'll see.
Yeah, I think so. But no, you have a lot to offer. And no, it's nice to meet you.
You too.
Let's keep this up, help each other find work and share some posts on the interwebs. But thank you for coming on. And to all the people watching, please make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, give me a like. And to all you people looking for work, we got to keep trying. Thanks.
You have to work for it. Don't be crazy and work for your money.